Hi, it's President's Day, and I'm going to read you about our first president, George Washington. This is my favorite book about him. You know, this feels kind of boring. He deserves a little more. There we are, my dears. This is a little better. I do apologize that no amount of hot irons and hairpins seems to hold my hair in the style worthy of 1776, when our dear General George Washington would have been alive and possibly acting out the parts of this book, which are true, I assure you. Just kidding. It did take a while to get into hair and makeup, but I did the best I could. But this is my favorite story about George Washington because it highlights his love of animals and his kindness and fairness for which he was known. George Washington and the General's Dog. This is by Frank Murphy, illustrated by Richard Waltz. George Washington is one of America's greatest heroes. Most people know that George was honest and brave, but there is something about George that people don't always know. Oh, do you see the bunny ears in the picture? That's a clue. Foreshadowing. Look at that. George loved animals. All kinds of animals. He lived on a farm. George learned to ride horses as a boy. Sometimes he rode into town. George rode fast, but he never fell. People said he was the best rider they had ever seen, as he was flying by on his horse. When George grew up, he moved to a farm called Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon is in Virginia, where I live. Every day, George checked on the horses and dogs. He checked on the oxen, mules, and sheep, but he spent the most time with his dogs. George had a lot of dogs. He owned 36 dogs in his lifetime. He took them hunting, he played with them, he even gave them cute names like Mopsy, Sweet Lips, and True Love. Sometimes George spoiled his dogs. He let them run around the house. One day, George's wife, Martha, cooked a ham for dinner. You know what's going to happen, right? Uh-oh. George's dog, Vulcan, jumped up and stole the ham right off the table. Martha chased after him, but George just laughed. I hope she had a backup plan for dinner. George liked being at Mount Vernon with Martha and the animals, but America needed him. America was not yet its own country. It was an English colony. That means it belonged to England. Many American colonists wanted to be free from England, so they went to war. The war was called the American Revolution. The colonists chose George to be their general. George chose his favorite dog, Sweet Lips, to go with him. He said goodbye to Martha and Mount Vernon. He jumped on his horse, Nelson. Then he rode into battle. Sweet Lips was right beside him. In George's day, soldiers often brought dogs with them to war. Dogs helped hunt. Dogs helped track the way. Dogs helped guard against wild animals. Best of all, dogs were great partners. They also probably kept you warm. During the American Revolution, they didn't always have the supplies, including blankets and shoes that they needed. So if you brought your dog, he could keep you warm at night. The general of the English army was named William Howe. He had a dog too. He also had 9,000 soldiers, and they had plenty of supplies. Those are the redcoats, the English. George did not have nearly as many supplies. Sometimes his soldiers were cold. Sometimes they were hungry, but they did not give up. Because freedom is worth fighting for. So they kept on with the battle. In the fall of 1777, George's troops went to Pennsylvania. They were fighting the English troops. Guns fired, rat-a-tat-tat, cannons roared, boom, bang. Smoke filled the air. Finally, the fighting ended. The English soldiers then went back to their camp. The battle was over for the day. The smoke began to clear. George noticed a dog without a soldier. It looked lost. George bent down and patted the dog's head. You can imagine that would be scary. A lot of dogs these days are scared of fireworks. So imagine being in the middle of a noisy battle with gun and smoke and all the people. The dog followed George back to the colonist camp. He wagged his tail. Whose dog is this? Wondered George. George looked at the dog's collar. The tag had a man's name on it. That name was William Howe. William Howe? George couldn't believe his eyes. William Howe was the enemy. What is he going to do? He's got the enemy's dog. This could be a bargaining chip. Word about the enemy dog spread through camp. Some of George's men wanted to keep the dog, but George said no. George believed the dog belonged with his master. George had his friend Alexander Hamilton write a note to General Howe. The note said that George wanted to return the dog. Because General Howe probably missed his dog. You took your favorite animal to fight with you. Both sides raised white flags. The white flags meant no one could fight. George's soldiers walked the dog across the battlefield. They gave him back to General Howe. Oh, look how cute. He was so happy to be reunited. He's giving him big slobbery kisses. Ooh, that's my least favorite part about a dog. People in England found out about George's good deed. The English still wanted to beat George and win the war, but now they respected him. Some English people even liked him. They had never heard a story of such great kindness between enemies. You never know where your good deeds will take you. In 1783, America won the war against England. America became its very own country. George Washington went home to Mount Vernon. Look at that, they're having a parade and fireworks. He's riding on Nelson and he's got sweet lips. They're headed home. Friends around the world wanted to honor George. They wondered what he would like. Then they remembered the story about the dog. Soon presents started arriving at Mount Vernon. The King of Spain sent George a mule. George named him the Royal Gift. Oh, mules kick a lot. You got to watch out. Don't stand behind them. A friend from France gave George an even bigger gift. 7 dogs. But that was his favorite. Now Sweet Lips has more friends to play with. And they look like hound dogs, hunting dogs. George's work was not done, though. The American people needed a leader. They elected George to be their first president. People all over America loved their new president. They cheered when he rode by in his carriage. They knew it was him because his 6 white horses always led the way. Okay, I gotta admit, that reminds me a little bit of Cinderella and her carriage. There's George waving. Can you see him waving? Hello, American people. I'm glad to serve you. All right, this is the author's note in the back. Now, these are real pictures from the past. The stories in this book are true. We can't be sure exactly how they all happened, but we've tried our best to show the way things might have been. So there's a picture of George on his horse, Nelson, and Alexander Hamilton, and William Howe. And then this is the note, a picture of the note. It's in cursive, which is what a lot of people, and it's fancy cursive, probably on a piece of parchment paper. So you'll notice that these are paintings or drawings because back then they didn't have cameras yet. So this is a painting of George Washington on his horse. All right. I hope you enjoyed that book. It is one of my favorites about our first president, George Washington. I hope this will encourage you to do some more research about George Washington. You may have learned things like he chopped down a cherry tree. That's not a true story. Or he had wooden teeth. Also not a true story. They were made of bones. And as all people, George Washington was not perfect. You may find out some things about him that you didn't like. He was not a perfect person, but he was a great leader and our first president. I hope this book will inspire you to be kind to your enemies. to fight hard for your freedom and maybe to love history a little bit. Thank you for learning with Miss Roseberry. Now I can go take my hair down.